I realized that I had skills that I didn't necessarily try to go and find. A lot of us are looking for like these big master plans, and a lot of the things that we end up doing in life find us. Coming out of that, I had to make a decision, and that decision was to pick myself.
Welcome to the Impact Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Morris, and we're going to get into it today. I have an author, speaker, and founder of The Thing, Terry Weaver, in the house, and I am jazzed up as always. Welcome to the podcast,
Dude,
Terry.
you're always jazzed up, man. You with your Boston roots, I just assume you've been by Dunkin'. You've had your dunks.
That's it, man.
I just saw they came out with like a 48-ounce bucket of iced coffee, like in the Boston area. Like it's like a
pail?
Like a pail of iced coffee.
I
know this is the content. This is the top-notch content. But anytime somebody's from that part of the country, from like Jersey to like North Mass, we got to talk dunks.
That's it, man. That's it. Wicked good.
Wicked good.
Wicked good.
And their Super Bowl commercials are consistently some of the best every year at telling stories.
Did you see that skit where they're going over all the towns and cities in Massachusetts? It's like Damon and Affleck. And
Yeah.
It's, dude, it is hilarious. And they're right for most of them. A little exaggerated, but
sure.
But most of the part, they're right. Yeah. All right. Well, true impact effect fashion. I always ask every single guest, Terry, what is the most impactful moment in your life that really just changed everything for the future?
I've been thinking about this one, and it's one of those podcast guest questions. So it's weird because you think of like, I think it's a seasonal question, right? Like there's seasons of like, for me spiritually, when I decided to follow Jesus, for me, when I married my wife, like, but specifically kind of for our context, I'm thinking about in 2014, I did an event in LA with a business partner who did not see my value, who did not understand. And this was somebody that I had, ghost written all their content. They had nothing to say. They didn't even know what half of the words meant in entrepreneurship, which is funny looking back on it. But we did an event together. We had done a membership program together. And then it became really clear that this wasn't going to go forward because he didn't see my value. And he kept thinking of me like a workhorse, not a partner. And it was very much like this was a big part of my vision. And, I drove the train. And I think that's really interesting for a lot of people because they want partners, they want collaborators, but they want them like employees. They want to treat people who don't necessarily have, you want people leaning in, and I think we've all experienced that in business. And so for me, I had to make a decision kind of coming off of that after we went on a cruise to Hawaii with some settlement money. And kind of rethinking like, okay, what am I going to do? Because essentially, my background was I worked in the music business and I worked as someone who would go and speak in churches. And I realized that a lot of the skills that I had built during that bands are brands, that every place I would go, I would encounter somebody fed up with their life and want change. And so, I'd be sitting at someone's house or a coffee shop, or if we were being honest, Waffle House, trying to like reconstruct a new plan for their life. And I realized that I had skills that I didn't necessarily try to go and find. A lot of us are looking for like these big master plans, and a lot of the things that we end up doing in life find us. And so coming out of that, I had to make a decision, and that decision was to pick myself and to stop hiding behind. I had one little hiccup when we first started the thing. I had a business partner for the very first, just because I didn't believe in myself all the way. And I thought he could potentially bring something to the table that he clearly couldn't, other than a headache and a heartache.
Why do you think you Why do you think you didn't believe in yourself in that moment?
Well,
What was driving that?
I mean, live events are tough, man.
Oh, you'd say so.
And, you know, I do my best to kind of bootstrap live events. So they kind of scale with the audience, and we're not, you know, I've given up on, you know, paying for big name gobbledygook gurus that don't fill seats.
It's funny how that works, huh? It's funny how that works.
Because they don't fill seats. I remember somebody who I dearly respected. I remember telling their manager, I was like, that would mean they would have to sell every ticket for the event for them to be worth that. He's like, where do you get that math? I was like, well, I worked in the music business. And so I called my friends up who were still doing arena tours and said, hey, what's the math? If someone makes X, what are we expecting them to sell ticket wise? You know? And yeah, you know, I remember a friend that's actually been on my podcast. You know, he was like, you know, kind of a big name guy, a Nashville local guru. I use the word guru a lot because they're kind of guys that their brand has kind of gotten bigger than they are. A lot of times their integrity didn't follow them along the path. And I think it's a tough realization because no one's ever going to believe in the things we do more than we do. And that's just reality. I mean, that's just the harsh reality. And people can say it. People can, you know, even kind of partially buy in. But no one's going to be all in like you're all in.
Did you hire someone back in the day and think that they were going to sell all those tickets and they didn't? Like, how did you learn that? Or was that just something where you leveraged a connection, a friend in the business and was like, dude, don't do that. Don't do that.
Well, I started to bring people and I'm like, man, you haven't sold any tickets. I mean, 0. I mean, I've got attendees that have sold more tickets than you have. It's kind of like the same thing when someone guests on your podcast. When you have like a big name guy, they're not gonna share the episode. But, you know, Susie, who's hungry, who has only been on a handful of shows, is going to share the heck out of it. And there are always exceptions to the rule. But, you know, and some people do get the vision, but they never get it to the level that we think they should. And I think live events still are the most powerful tool to create change in 2026. Hands down. No argument.
Why do you think that?
Well, because dude, as cool as this is, there's the AI tools that could have this conversation for us. And 90% of the world wouldn't know the difference. Now, I can tell you I'm real. You know, Jim's real. We're here. We're in Nashville. We're recording this today. But so much of what's been, you know, a lot of business comes down to, and this sounds really harsh, but it's so true. A lot of business comes down to the reality that there has to be the evidence to convict you of what you say you are. If we were going to take Jim Morris to brand to court, there has to be evidence that says you have those gifts, you have those skills, you've gotten those results for people. Your integrity has opened doors for people. Your relationships have opened doors. And there is. I've been around you, dude. I know that's the case. But a lot of people are all talk and no, you know, they've got a good marketing team behind them. And then when they get there, there's just, it's an inch deep and 400 miles wide of nothing.
It's sad when you see some of that stuff happen to someone who may be investing into a program or even an event or a workshop where they're using the last of their income or you know, Shit, man. I'll tell you a quick story. I was at an event and I bought the ticket. It was $500 and I was making good money. Several $100,000 at the time. And I was like, $500, it's $500, right? This is years ago. And not really a drop in the bucket for me. Like, right. Like I was still obviously being cautious of my money. And I got there and a couple hours in, I'm like, man, I kind of feel like this just isn't what I thought it was going to be. And we go to a break and I walk over to a gentleman and he's getting a cup of coffee and I'm getting a cup of coffee and I'm like, hey, what's up, brother? Right? Human connection. I'm building relationships. I'm like, what's up, brother? What do you think? Because at that point I'm trying to see like, maybe this just isn't hitting for me.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey man, yeah, this is great. I sold my truck to be here today. And dude, it was like all my energy got sucked out of me because I knew that I wasn't in a position to get what I thought I was getting. And I could only imagine selling your truck to be in that room, hoping, wishing, wanting that this is going to change your life. And at the end of the event, there was an after party. I couldn't even get myself to go to the after party because all I could think about was this gentleman.
Sold his truck, yeah.
He sold his truck and he's not going to get anything out of this, It was unfortunate to say the least.
Well, I would argue that even in a room where the value may not be delivering from stage, that I believe we're all one relationship away from a different life. That we're one connection. You talk a lot about connection. That the right connection, the right relationship, someone that can open a door. And man, believe me, at the event that I do one here in Nashville, one in Orlando. I mean, in the Orlando event, I think of a girl, I think in 2000, I guess it was 2019, I guess. And like she was sleeping in her car to be at the event. And I'm like, hey, I've got an Airbnb. You can, at the very least, I'm not even staying in it right now. Go stay in the bedroom I was staying in. Like, just wash the sheets because I sweated them for 4 nights because that's where we do our VIP stuff in Orlando. And man, that's heavy when you see. But also, kind of the flip side of that is, when you're trying to sell an event, you also realize is that the first person that I feel like what that guy might have gotten was belief in himself. That guy may have never bet on himself. Like going back to the question you asked me, that guy may have never said, I'm going to do something ridiculous to get something that seems ridiculous.
Totally.
And sure, it makes you, I'm not saying anybody should do that. I'm not saying they need to, some guru that served you an ad that said, it's so easy, anyone can do it. Which is literally somebody, big name in Nashville, who's made millions and millions and millions of dollars. That's literally their pitch. And it's not easy. It's in fact, it's harder now than it's ever been.
Why do you think that?
Well, noise. It's just like in the music business. The music business has never stumbled. It's just diversified. When you look at like the top 20 selling albums of all time, like the Eagles and, those 80s Bon Jovi's records, I forget a couple of Beatles records, and those records sold, like actually physically sold, like in the high 20 million, Thriller sold, I think 21 million units or something like that. Now that would never happen. Nobody would ever experience that level. For one, no one's actually buying music. They're, we listen to Spotify the whole way here. And they're making, pennies on the dollar through that. But also that platform, indies have the same access to that platform as, Bon Jovi does right now. Now, granted, you've got to gamify that platform like anything else. And I think the most difficult thing right now is the lack of people willing to pursue authenticity. Is everyone's looking for a shortcut and hack and like latest trend. You know what works, man? The stuff that worked 50 years ago. I'm not kidding.
No, you're right.
Mail somebody something. You want to freak a client out? Send them a handwritten note. Mail people. A buddy of mine just moved, Austin Armstrong. He's one of the most brilliant AI minds I know. He speaks at our event. And
is he down in Chattanooga, or did he move again?
He just moved back to Raleigh, I think. They were just in Chattanooga for his wife for a year. Great dude. Austin's a great guy. But he moved, and like, so they bought a new house, and like a pest inspector or a pest company sent him like a hat or something. Like, what? But it was enough to get his attention, because everything else, when the whole, and that's sort of the success. If you want to stand out right now, if everyone's going digital, go analog. If everybody's yin and yang, if everybody's, and it's always going to, how many things have you heard on the internet that are dead? Podcasting's dead. I think podcasting's bigger than it's ever been. It's crowded. It's noisy. It's crowded with celebrities, because celebrities have realized how powerful the platform it is. The technology. I watched an interview the other day on the Spotify app on my TV, which I think is where when YouTube and all these other channels find a smoother way to integrate through your television, and you're not, watching, 3 inches from your face on your little phone, but you're watching your favorite influencer, your favorite business podcast. I think it was Burt Kreischer, who's a comedian, and Jeff Foxworthy, and they were talking about how to construct jokes. It's a fantastic conversation about stories and communication from like this young up and coming guy, and then like Foxworthy, who's the OG of comedy, and but people like that, like Jeff Foxworthy. I had the privilege of speaking at an event with Jeff one time, and I've been around some of the stuff he's done in Atlanta. Just kind human, just a good dude.
I admire him. I listened to an interview, and he was talking about how he was good friends with the gentleman who owned Chick-fil-A. It was a mentor of his.
Yeah.
And it's actually a phrase that I often will put online. He talked about how the founder of Chick-fil-A would always tell him that encouragement is free.
Yeah.
And how he had continued to pass that on and live a life around that. And I say it all the time. I didn't make it up, but when I heard that, I was like, man, what a powerful statement. And then you think about Chick-fil-A, and you think about Jeff Foxworthy, and you think about the impact that they've had on people and how they've navigated life, and how popular they've been. And it's like in very interesting and unique industries, right? Like the fast food industry, comedy. And I think about that as the through line, and I'm like, man, and here you are saying like you spoke with him on stage, and he's just a nice guy, a good dude.
Yeah. It's funny. He spoke at the breakfast at the event. It was at the Georgia World Congress Center, and he was doing a whole bit about his prostate exams. It's like, it's not probably what I want with my sausage and eggs in the morning, but but also hilarious, right? Just because. And what's interesting about Jeff is like, you might be a redneck, is a introverted or a reversed punchline. The punchline is first. You might be a redneck if is the punchline, but it comes before the joke.
When you are on stages, when you're having these amazing speakers at your event called The Thing,
Jeff Foxworthy's not coming to The Thing, so. Although I kind of feel like he's the kind of guy that if I asked and it made sense. In fact, we're going to do a one day in Atlanta event, and I may just ask because I have a connection point, and I'm willing to make audacious asks. They can only say no.
It doesn't hurt as bad as asking your best friend or something and they say no.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Then you quickly you quickly discover who they are. Sorry to interrupt your question. I just didn't want people thinking that Foxworthy was going to be at the thing doing a bit.
To be determined.
Yeah,
To be determined.
Who knows?
No, I guess I was just going to ask you, like, you know, you've spoken on stages with some high level folks. You've had some great people, great speakers, high level speakers on your stages at the thing. How do you connect with those type of folks and ensure that you're building a relationship and you're doing it in a way that they will come back and speak, or you will build a good connection with them and continue to show up in their world and them show up in yours?
Well, I think a lot of it is just encouragement is one of those things. Being curious about who they are and what they're doing and offering to help to serve them if you can. Now, granted, when you do an event, as you know, there's always a lot of people that want your stage. And, you know, that's also tough because I curate my stage pretty hard. I'd rather you be a horrible communicator and a great human being, you know, and, you know, what's interesting about that part is the people that have come that have been less than awesome as on the human category, they've kind of like found their way out the back door. They've kind of self-selected to realize that this wasn't, you know, we do some things that are a little weird at our event. We don't have a green room. So there's no, you know, most of our speakers are there the entire weekend. So if, you know, there's a couple that'll fly in and out, like one of our speakers in Nashville this year is a friend of mine named Jonathan Lee Iverson. And he used to be the ringmaster for Ringling Brothers and Martin Bailey Circus. And he is currently with a circus in California, and Tuesdays is his day off. So he's going to fly after the Big Top on Tuesday night, fly here overnight probably, and speak Tuesday, and then go back to do the Wednesday night show wherever he happens to be, probably in California somewhere. But that's, you know, that's kind of the exception of the rule. And because he's one of the most, you know, people have freaked out over him, and he's super, he'll lean in the whole time he's there. Yeah. But I think a lot of it, man, it really just comes down to showing up places and investing yourself in people and being curious about what they're doing. And, you know, I'm a chubby fellow, so I trust my gut. I've had to learn like that skill.
It's interesting. You talk about people flying in and flying out and how you curate the room. And I admire that because I think it's so important to the experience. And I think it's so important. I believe you owe the audience that, right? Like the whole, like, I heard you on stage and I never had the opportunity to ask you the deep question that relates strategically back to what I need in this moment, or my business, or a struggle, or a hurdle I'm trying to get over, right? Yeah. And I think that actually is one of the most impactful moments of an event, is when you can actually go up to someone after you hear their keynote. You've had some time to download what they said, to think it through, and then a question pops up and you now have the opportunity
at the break to
have that conversation. And anytime I've gone to an event and just heard the speaker or just saw the speaker, it's like that deep question you want to ask them takes a little bit for it to hit, and poof, they're gone.
Yeah, they're at the airport.
You know what I mean? And for me, that's been the hardest thing for me to accomplish in my events, is to ask and position the event so the speakers will stay throughout it and will communicate and connect with the audience. It's the hardest thing that I've done in my events. How do you navigate that? Have you struggled with that? When did you start doing that? Have you always done that?
We've kind of said that's our preference. My kind of bare minimum for a speaker, unless like you're going this, like there's something, you know, crazy going on. I need you there for the whole day you're speaking at bare minimum, like, or 24 hours. Say you speak on Tuesday night, you know, or whatever night, you know, whatever you're speaking, you're there before and after you talk, not just the 32 minutes you're on stage or whatever you're on stage.
Someone asked me like, Ed Milet's amazing. Can you get Ed Milet? And I said, I think Ed Milet's amazing, but I don't think he aligns with what I'm trying to build. And they were like, well, what do you mean? Like he's this and that, and he's great. And I'm like, yeah, guys helped me. Seems great. A lot of people I know have spent time around him. They've said he's great. But for me, that's not so much impact, because I know that he's going to pull up at John C. Toon Private Airport, and he's not even going to turn the jet off. He's going to say, keep it running. And you can get that on his podcast. What's the difference of not getting that in the room?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was at a big name speaker event. My wife loves John Maxwell. And I was literally had just been released from the hospital. And I knew that we were supposed to be going to see John Maxwell the next day. And obviously at that point I could barely walk. Back in November, right before the thing, I had gotten some sort of infection and went into sepsis, and my body basically started shutting down. And so we decided, hey, I had already planned in January to be in Orlando kind of for a sabbatical season, kind of a reboot, reset. I was like, look, Maxwell's going to be here. Let's go check it out. And it was cool to hear John Maxwell. In fact, a buddy of mine was actually the host of the event. It was kind of one of those events where the tickets are cheap, but you're the sales pitch. And they had Milet. It's funny because Milet was there because they did the event twice back to back one day, and then the same event the next day because they had sold it out. And I was like, he was still in town, but he was doing podcast interviews, and I guess it goes back to like, the argument that someone like Ed would probably make is like, my time is valuable. And I would argue, yes, it is, but the best use of your time is to pour it in other people. And you're not wrong. I mean, a lot of those speakers, they suburbaned up 5 minutes before they spoke. A lot of them had stayed to hear, Maxwell we intentionally went to Maxwell because I was like, hey, dude, the guy's pushing 80.
He's getting up there.
There's not going to be a lot of chances to watch, and he's the goat at what he does, man. He's unfreaking believable. I got a chance to meet him. I got a chance to tell him that a talk that he had given kind of changed my life. And that was worth it. And we got a picture with him, and my wife was super happy. But for me to be able to shake his hand and say, thank you for that. It shifted things for me. And you gave me permission, because I caught it back in like 2014, kind of as I was going through that season of like, and what's interesting is podcasting has allowed me to meet a lot of interesting people.
What season were you going through?
But back when I was, when my first answer to your question is, I was trying to figure out what to do now, and
and Maxwell was there, baby. Let's go.
Well, what's interesting about Maxwell is there's a popular author. He's actually translated the Bible called The Message Translation, but he has a book. It's a book on like discipleship or whatever. But the title of the book is maybe one of the most important sentences in the world. It's called A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. And you don't have to read the book, but get the sentence. That's the problem that a lot of people struggle with, is they're not willing to go a long obedience in the same direction. I mean, you and I were just talking about people with business plans that change every 2 weeks. And it's like, you can accuse me a lot of things, but giving up is not typically one of them. I mean, I've stayed the course on the thing when, maybe conventional wisdom says, maybe I should have packed it in. And I think people sense, to really answer your question, one of the things I do when I curate the event is I've quickly learned is I don't know what you need. I mean, I know what you, but reality is you may not know what you need. Most people can't articulate what their needs are. Most people don't know. So like, you may know what you think you need, but I can look at it and go, man, this guy needs something else. I've learned that from coaching, because people always come to me and say, "This is what I think I need." I'm like, well, the first session we're going to unpack that and we're going to debunk that myth pretty quick. But I know what I need, and I know when I curate an event, I try to ask myself, like, who are the people that I know, or the people that I know that I need, I want to learn from, and I would, and I know that what my speakers would come and learn from. And so we hear a lot about niches, and one of the things that I think we make a mistake is I know I have multiple avatars in my business, or at least like multiple versions of an avatar. It's like the 1.0 version of Jim Morris is much different than the 4.0 version of Jim Morris. And if I don't catch you when you're at the 1.0, you won't stick around for when I can really, really help you. So I've got to build systems and structures. And we have people that have been coming to the thing for years that are still kind of climbing their journey and haven't. And then some people come and blow up their business. I mean, Liz Wilcox, if you know who Liz Wilcox, she was on Survivor. She's an email guru. She has this email membership that's $9.99 a month and makes $750,000 a year on a $9 membership. She was on, I think, season 47 of Survivor. Not my favorite show, but Liz is one of my favorite people, so I was rooting for her. But I mean, she met people. She came in 2018, I think. It was 2018, 2019, and couldn't really afford her ticket, could barely afford her hotel room. Showed up, met the right people, and the relationships are what unlock the doors. I mean, sure, the speakers, I want them to be great, but people in the room, and not just the people on the stage, but the other people are going to be. And one of my goals with the thing is a lot of our speakers, Liz is one of our speakers on the regular because she came up through the ranks. And when we did an event in 2020, like a crazy fool, in a house in Orlando, she was like, she went and hired a speaking coach, and she did all, like, she's like, I want to do the work to be able to do this. And so having a community that actually is growing and thriving and that people come out of it. And I know sometimes I give people a shot, maybe a little before, but I'm okay being that guy. I know that I have a couple of, like, it's kind of like building a baseball lineup. I know there's a couple of dudes and girls that are going to come up and hit it out of the park. And so not everybody has to do that, but what they can do is they can do that for one person.
Totally.
And I think the business that you and I are in and everybody's in is we're all in the possibility business. We're all in showing other people what's possible by our ridiculousness. We are showing people that, like, if Jim Morris can pull this off, you probably can too.
Totally.
If Terry Weaver can do an event for 10 years now, you can probably figure out doing what you need to do your thing. And that's the reality, is, like, I've discovered that everybody has this, like, value they bring to the world, this gift, and most people aren't deploying it. And a lot of people are going to discover, maybe not voluntarily, that the job that they thought was safe and secure isn't. And so now's the time to pick yourself, to bet on yourself, to go all in, chips in on yourself, and not waiting on somebody else to make your life happen. Because, I don't want to be the doomsday AI is coming for you, but if you're scared of AI, it's coming for you. If you're not willing to double down on your humanity, it's definitely coming for you. If you're not willing to grow and network and build connection, I think those answers are really, I think everything I've accomplished in life has been because of the connections and the relationships that I've had. Dude, my event ran without me. I'm in the ICU, clinging to my life, and people who have been in my mastermind are just like, and other people they're obviously Googling like sepsis. What's the, like my friend Justin Shank was like, dude, I Googled and like you had a 50% chance at living. I was like, I don't know that it was that bad. Thanks for not, thanks for not calling me at the hospital and telling me that. But all of these people stepped up and made sure that the event went on without me. And that's maybe the greatest testimony to what we've accomplished, that it's not about me. It's not about what I'm doing and what I'm creating. It's about what we're building and people. And, I think the greatest investment that we make in life is in people.
Oh yeah, dude. Say it louder for the homies in the back. Come on.
Right? Because we all talk about like what kind of like, you talk about legacy. And a lot of people think of legacy as like, what would your financial planner have to say? But what have you built in people? Because that will outlive you.
You impact someone at the root core with your words or with your actions. And that's a memorable experience that doesn't get forgotten.
No.
When the opportunity arises for them to impact someone, that experience may get rippled and transferred. And then when that occurs, that person can ripple and transfer that same scenario or that same nugget of information or that same push or that same structure of, hey, do this or do that, or when this happened. And most of it will come through storytelling, right? And storytelling's been around since, tribes and it's not going away. And I think that, we talked a little bit about AI, and it's like, I believe that is one of the most unique opportunities with the age and era of AI approaching at such a rapid rate, is like, AI can't make up a unique story that you've experienced, you believed, and you've now narrated and shared with a lesson, with a nugget, with a level of impact with someone else to where it's become memorable, which in turn they're going to transfer and there'll be a ripple effect of that information to someone else.
Yeah, I'm wrapping up a co-writing a book. It was one of those ideas that I had to do for a book, and I was like, I'm never going to get to this, but I can help someone outline it and get them started on it, about stories and about the stories that you can go and tell. I've had good friends on my podcast that I've had to say, hey man, let's try that again in a couple of weeks and go find some key stories from your life and business that you can tell that'll impact people that you can teach a truth through. Because I think storytelling is the most undervalued skill in the world right now. And, you can't even get a good prompt in a, chat bot unless you tell it a great, hey, this is what happened. And I want to tell a great, our ability to have things and to notice things in our life that we've seen. I mean, that's what Jeff Foxworthy does. That's what comedy is. Stand-up comedy is just someone who's noticed something and went, eh. And Nashville's oddly become kind of a comedy town. Nate Barkowski had this great joke that broke his life open, how he went to Starbucks one time and how he ordered iced coffee and he got to the end and he had just milk on ice. And so he, goes on a rant about what psychopath orders iced milk at Starbucks, like what, how crazy did they think I was? It's what broke him free when everyone was sitting at home in 2020. And it was the story that changed everything for him. In fact, 7 years ago today, my wife just showed me on the way here, we went to with him and John Chris at like a friend's country club that they had brought him in. And, and now the dude's, John's selling out the Opry and Nate's selling out arenas 2 or 3 nights in a city. He's had Seinfeld out with him and Jimmy Fallon's been gone out with him some. His dad. And so it's building an amusement park here in Nashville. Like all of that's because that guy noticed stuff and then told stories around it in kind of a unique way with a unique tone, kind of a deadpan delivery, unique, different than everybody else. He said, I'm gonna do it clean.
It's relatable too. There's truth in those things, and it's the uniqueness, I think, isn't necessarily the thing or the action or what he's talking about, but it's the deliverability, it's the framing.
Oh yeah.
And it's the common thing that we just skip over and no one actually says, especially on those stages.
Well,
you know?
because you see, he saw something unique, and that's what allowed his perspective, back to perspective, possibility. You know, that's what it comes down to: perspective and possibility. Those are your weapons. That's how you win the war of 2026. And let's forget what's going on in the Middle East. But the real war is being able to take your perspective and get it out into the world, whether it's funny jokes or stories about your kids or stories about how people you met changed your life, or stories about how you made a decision, like you ask a question, like what's a decision that you made, or stories about relationships that changed everything for you. It's those stories and those moments. And just like I told a little bit of Liz's story, how she met people, she went, her story is deeper than that. Like she went out, and that's the thing with a story, is a story kind of grows and compacts based on how you tell the story. I have a 30-second version of that story, and I could tell 30 minutes of that story, depending on the setting and who it's with and how deep it is and how much detail and how much context I want to go into it.
You want to bring into it. Yeah.
Yeah. And how much Disney calls it five sensing. How much of that do I want you to, there are places you go, you can smell. You walk in a movie theater, you smell the buttered popcorn. That's a story. That's a way to tell a story. Your feet normally stick to the floor as soon as you sit down, because like those are things I could tell you about that experience that it kind of start taking you into that. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're struggling right now with what to do, find a way to invite people into your stories and tell like real, authentic stories about transformation that you're helping people get, transformation that you've received, wisdom that you've gleaned. And it doesn't all have to be your like IP. I'm not telling you to copy someone. I mean, you could go and throw out a John Maxwell quote or story or Ed Milet. The one thing that Ed did as a communicator that I've not seen anyone ever do when he spoke at this, and I've never been much, I'll be honest, I've never been like, and he's shifted. Something has shifted in Ed. And I actually talked to my buddy that was backstage with him, and I said, what? It shifted when he changed who he hung out with. Because he used to see like pictures of him with a private jet and like all that stuff. And like his intro reel, which by the way, I hate intro reels, was full of all that garbage of his houses, and who cares, right? But he started to hang out with guys like John Gordon and Erwin McManus and Maxwell. And his life shifted because he kind of became less of a tool. He kind of became less of a bro marketer and just kind of,
honest depth, I would call it.
Well, what he did, man, was he leaned in, like physically, like when he was telling stories, and he was telling this really intense story about his dad and his dad dying, and kind of that experience. I mean, he moved the room emotionally, but he did it because he physically like got to the edge of the stage, and he told stories in such a way that you were hanging on for every word. And they were just, normal stories that everybody else probably has. I mean, granted, his involved a dad that beat him and, all of that stuff, and a relationship restored at the end of his dad's life. And something his dad, I forget, whatever the talk was centered on his latest book about a decision. And
man, it's powerful to feel the story through the emotions of the details rather than just flying over them or just navigating through at speed. It's very interesting. As we wrap up, the last question I want to ask you is, why did you call your event The Thing? Let's land the plane there.
First, it was sort of a joke. right? Because it's just like every time we talk about somebody's event, like, yeah, Jim Morris has got his event coming, his thing coming up. It's gonna be in Nashville. It's got speakers. Justin Mosley's coming. Yada yada yada. Nicole Kramer's coming. You know, like it's Jim's thing, and like we sort of in the industry we start talking to each other about the stuff we're doing, and that's kind of the joke. And the original vision behind the thing was a frustration from me that you'd go to an event with a lot of information, and yet it feels like you always left the event without like knowing how to put it together. It's like you left IKEA without the instructions. Not that IKEA's instructions are that helpful. I'm not wrong.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
It's always like, what is that man with no arms doing with that screwdriver? But I felt like the first idea was the Assemble conference, but that was about the same time Avengers was coming out. I just felt like, that feels cheesy. That feels like a bad VBS experience. And so I began to kind of process through it. Like, everybody has a thing, everybody has this gift, this talent, this desire, this wish, this dream, this calling, dare I say. And the world suffers when people don't act on those. And so, it's, the title is sort of ambiguous. It's kind of our best friend and our worst enemy when it comes to marketing it. But I also think things that are named properly, a lot of times we have been taught to complete the sentence. And I don't want to complete this sentence. I want to invite you to a conversation. And so when you ask, what's the thing? I can tell you, I can ask you about your thing and what it is and encourage you that, hey, we're going to spend 3 days working on your thing and helping you make it better. So that's really the vision behind the thing. If anybody's listening and has this like idea, one of the things that has become really about is not just people doing their thing, but people finding community for their thing. People finding a group of people that actually are with them and encouraging them and helping them actually thrive at it. And so, yeah, man, that's the thing. We do it in Nashville in June and in November in Orlando. So if anybody's, I know you got a lot of Nashville listeners probably. Love to have you guys come out June 7th, 8th, and 9th. The Drury Inn in Franklin, Tennessee. Right off the interstate there. Easy to get in and out of. Be an amazing couple of days. In fact, if you live in Nashville, I'd encourage you to come stay in the hotel. Just so you can lean in. So you can actually be there and like hang out with people. Because that's the real value, I think, man, is we're all going to leave and go to dinner, or a couple of groups will go to dinner at places, and that those relationships, those conversations that happen in the margins are the real magic. And sure, that doesn't mean I'm going to let the speaker suck, but hopefully we're going to set the table during our time together to get you to be thinking and asking questions. And hopefully we haven't given you all the answers. We've given you some questions that you need to come up with. In fact, one of the unique things we do kind of in closing is we did this starting in 2020 because I had a lot of speakers that said they were going to be there and got COVID. So it's like, oh man, like it's 2020. I can't just like pull speakers out of the air. And people always cancel. That's just what people do. People are human. It's gotten less and less over the years, mainly just because I have started to threaten people. Just because it's such a low integrity thing to commit to something. I mean, unless I'm on the edge of death, I'm going to be somewhere. If I said yes, I'm going to be there. And so we do this deal where everybody gets a card and we put a bucket on the edge of the stage. And the question is, write down the one thing that you came into these days that we're together, the one thing you need fixed in your business, the one problem you need solved, the one answer you need. And so then throughout the weekend, I literally, if we're killing time during the event, I grab a card out of the bucket, I read it, and then if I know a speaker has something specific, I'll have that speaker come up with me. And then the whole room kind of starts helping them.
It's like a true mastermind in the moment.
We basically turn the room into a hot, Now, some people stay anonymous. Honestly, that makes it real hard to help somebody. But if they really need help,
cool, man. Well, thanks for being on the podcast, brother.
Man,
I appreciate you. It's been a great conversation.
Dude, we've been planning this. I've actually done a podcast with someone else in your house.
I know.
Like way back in the day. So I don't know what's taken us so dang long to do this.
I forgot about
But here we are.
Well, we did it, man, and it was amazing, dude.
Yeah, it was
Thank
fun.
you so
Thanks for
much,
having me on.
brother.